Hello, I'm Al Castro, and welcome to another episode of Sergeant Al's Traffic Ticket Blog. This is going to be the first of a series of episodes that are about the Nissan Leaf, and we're going to be talking about the Nissan Leaf, the frustration that a lot of the early adopters had when the car first came out of having a very limited range, and even problems that one reader wrote to me recently about buying a late model used Nissan Leaf that only had maybe about 90 miles of range, and she bought it from a new car dealer 500 miles away, and she did her calculations to figure out that she would have to recharge it 4 times, that she didn't want to be bothered with it, that she actually was going to give up buying it, but I told her to hold on and gave her a case as to why buying a car like that as a late model used, especially for a young person, is really of great value. We are at the Automobile Driving Museum in El Segundo, California, where their collection consists of gasoline vehicles that are actually operational and working. Every single one of these cars that you see around here works and you can drive it. And with the way the progression of electromobility is going, most likely this will be one of the last few places coming up to on Earth, if not after the country and on the North American continent, where you actually will be able to take out a gasoline vehicle and wonder what it's like to drive it, what that was like during the 20th and 21st century. I don't think we realize it yet with the progression of electromobility, but there will come a time, and very soon, not next year or 2 years from now, don't worry, but there will come a time and a good chance in most of our lifetimes where you will not be able to, or it will be extremely difficult for you to operate a gasoline vehicle on the road. They'll either heavily tax you, or you have to get a variance or some kind of permit to make it difficult. And this will probably be one of the last few places where you can legally and legitimately get into a gasoline car and start it and drive it to wonder what that phenomena was like during the 20th and early 21st century. One of the things, however, I've noticed on the internet is a lot of you have a lot of misconceptions about what electric cars are. And part of the reason why we're here with this blog is to try to debunk them. And I can tell when somebody comes online and says something like, well, the electric cars are too expensive and, they need to make them cheap. Well, they are in that process of doing it. So I can tell exactly where you are with your research and reading to know what phase you're at when it comes to electric cars and the information that we're giving out there. So let's go over these myths and discuss them or what have you. Number one, electric cars do not draw on fossil fuels as a primary source. This is true. It has been proven time and time again, and I'm tired of even giving you the URLs and the quotes and the citations. Electric cars do not draw on fossil fuels as a primary source of energy. And if you're screaming that loudly about that, then what you need to do is put a solar panel on your home charger to negate that and end that discussion right then and there. So I'm not going to even waste my time even going further with that. Ion car batteries are recyclable, and it's a process that's an emerging growth industry. I hear a lot of people online saying that we should not be adopting electromobility because these ion batteries are not rechargeable. They're being put in landfills. They're being put in landfills. No, they're not being put in landfills. And believe me, if they are, there's people there that are picking them out and putting them into the recycling process. It is a growth industry and it is exploding. I mean, I've even written articles about that on the online magazine. If you go to Google and do a search like ion car batteries recyclable, do Nissan Leaf batteries recycle, you'll see right there an industry that's growing. I've written articles about how they take repurposed Nissan Leaf batteries and they're making campers out of them, okay? So you don't have to worry about them being put into a landfill, okay? So that's number two, the myth of electric cars. Number three, there is two aspects to a car polluting the earth. There's the industrial process to assemble them, and then when you use them. An electric car pays back its carbon use after 2 years of use on the road. Okay, so whatever pollution that the car made to bring its existence onto the earth, it's negated when you use it for at least 2 years. So if you're so big on that, then what you need to do is wait a year or two from now until there's a decent used battery electric vehicle and buy it late model used. And that'll negate that problem, okay? And this also lends itself to another myth down the road about if you want your gas car, you can keep it. It's about buying a brand new one. If you already have a gas car, keep it, but I'll explain that in a little bit, okay? So that's number 3. Number 4, a gas Econobox makes me save money over an electric car. That is false. It's false, folks. It's all about the supply chain. Once a car company switches supply chains like General Motors and Volkswagen Group has, yeah, they still make gas cars, but they're now tooled up to make electric cars. For all practical purposes, and this was taped in the summer of 2019, General Motors and VW Group, that's the whole Bentley, Ferrari, Seat, Volkswagen, the whole kit and caboodle. They're now an electric entity. They just so happen to make gas vehicles. That's the best way that I can describe it. And as they go along in their industrial process, these cars will become as price point no different than they are with gasoline vehicles that they really are starting to become. Okay, so yes, your electric car will save you money. You just need to get better math. Myth number 5. Let's talk about hydrogen cell fuel cars. Hydrogen fuel cell is not the solution, and it's not the car of the moment, okay? If hydrogen fuel cell was, while Tesla was putting up its supercharger network around the globe and VW Group was putting up its charger stations in the rest of the world, and then they came here and did Electrify America, they should have been going out and putting hydrogen fuel stations around the world, and they didn't do that, and there's a reason why. The technology has not been perfected, and it needs to be cheapened, it needs to be perfected, it needs to be quickened, expedited, it needs to be simplified. There's still a lot of nuts and bolts that need to be taken in and taken out of that technology in order for it to have an industrial purpose. I personally believe that probably will be the next step, and it probably will happen 25, 50, most likely 50 to 75, 50 to 100 years from now. Most of us will be so gone to not even to be an issue. One of the things I've learned in my journalism process of covering transportation is that it's not necessarily about the best technology that you have, but the technology being at the right time and the right moment, and most importantly, that it is cheap. It has to be cheap. And this is one of the problems that the electric car faced 100 years ago during the brass era. Yes, the gasoline car industry had a lot to do with speeding it up to get rid of it. But the bottom line is that if you wanted to do any kind of long distance driving, you really had to have a destination point or a leeway point halfway or along the journey where you can plug the car in and have it recharged. And many people didn't have that option. They didn't. And the chargers for these things were humongous. You didn't even put them in the car. So that's one of the reasons, probably one of the primary reasons why the electric car died 100 years ago. The technology has vastly improved. And this is also about being the wiser of an industry that got rid of them in the first place, to not make those same mistakes, to make sure that an infrastructure was in place in case someone needed to recharge and they weren't home, okay? So that's another myth about hydrogen cell fuel cars. If it was the car of the moment, it would have came already, and it hasn't. It needs more work, and that's the way it is. And quite frankly, we're running out of time. I think personally we are too late in this climate change process. The damage is irreversible. But the way that the technology and the way that the climate is going, I'm telling you right now, we need to do something now. And what's nice about electromobility is that it's a lot more flexible. It's a lot more flexible than petromobility, and it's a lot more flexible than hydrogen cell. You can recharge anywhere, and the technology is in its layout is so simple. You can pull it out of the vehicle and put something else in there. It is much easier to convert an electric car to gas than it is to convert a gas car to electric. And some of you that have gone through that conversion process, and we'll talk about that in upcoming episodes, know exactly what I'm talking about. Number 6, and this is what I was relating to before about electric cars. If you already have a gas car, keep it. It's already here on the planet. Most likely it's a newer model. It's low emissions. You're better off keeping your gas car than going out and buying a brand new hydrogen car. You're adding another gas vehicle into the world that we don't need. Let's just keep the ones that we have here and keep the situation contained. And this is about you not bowing to peer pressure to get a vehicle that you need when you want it, how you want it. This is like being in high school with peer pressure. Don't feel you have to get an electric car because everyone else does. This is a vehicle that has to suit your needs and purpose. And I'm telling you, there's a car that's coming down the road in the next 5 years that's going to satisfy your needs. And if you wait for it, it's worth it. And in the end, you're going to have a participation that makes a cleaner environment. But if you have a vehicle already and it's gasoline, keep it, all right? Just when you get the opportunity, and we would all like you to go electromobile when the time is right and when it's ready for you. Number 7, and I'll be talking about this as we go along, the public charging network is as good as it's ever going to get, okay? If you are expecting a gasoline dynamic where a charger is going to be around the corner, that is not going to happen, folks. Not going to happen. Now, never once did I mention in any comment section of my social media as to whether we need more chargers or less chargers. I never said anything about that. I do know that you need to brace yourself once you get an electric car to know what the dynamic of the public charging network is, and it is not a gasoline dynamic. First of all, you need to take out your phone and get an app to find the nearest one. Preferably, you should make an appointment so you don't have to wait online. And understand that when you get there, the equipment may not be compatible or it might be broken and you may have to go somewhere else. Most of your charging is going to be at home for this to be a non-issue. But if you do a lot of driving, whether it's pleasure or business, if you live in that 11-state region out west where the nearest public charger is 80 miles away, you're going to face these problems. Also, the most popular way you're going to face electromobility problems is if you are, like me, a city resident, you live in an apartment building and there is no charger in your building. What's the solution? The solution is not to get a hybrid. The solution actually is to get yourself deeper into electromobility. And that's by getting a long-range BEV with those 300, 400-mile range so that you don't have to constantly worry about recharging. And number 8, what's the alternative? You know, one of the things I see on the internet in my comments section is a lot of people complaining, but I see very little solution, okay? Listen, this is about our children and our nieces and nephews, and what kind of life we're leaving behind them, and what kind of life we want for them to live. And by adopting electromobility, if you look at it this way, I think you can put it in a context that we all can live with. At the very least, what we're trying to do is give them time so that our children will be able to solve the problems that we can't. If we don't find a solution for the environment, we can use electromobility to hopefully stop the process or significantly slow it down so that we find other solutions that can save our planet and save our lives for our kids. And that's the 8 myths and rumors and falsehoods that we debunk here on Sergeant Al's Traffic Ticket blog. Coming up, the Nissan Leaf, and how do we use it? What is it? And how do we get around that short range that the Nissan Leaf is famous for in the next few episodes coming right up?